All right, welcome into another edition of a Bulls video mailbag. This is going to be a regular feature here at Chicago Sports Network. This is episode 2, and I thank you as always for your questions. I am checking my mentions. Let's start with at Bulls Nation BR_. This is a long-time reader and follower, so shout out to Bulls Nation Brazil. With each passing day, the trade deadline gets closer and closer, but the Bulls haven't managed to exchange any of their assets yet. What's the reason for that? Are the Bulls asking too high for their assets, or have the teams been offering too little? This is a great question. It strikes to the core of, to me, what is the conundrum of the NBA trade deadline, because teams talk all season long. That's just what executives do. That's why you hear so many rumors all the time. But typically, things don't get serious until closer to the week of the trade deadline, particularly when you're talking about the potential trade assets the Bulls have in Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine. Those are big contracts to move, and so teams are probably going to hold off on their serious offers until you get closer to that trade deadline. I've said before on this very feature, and I've written and said on a broadcast that Bulls are open for business, so they are willing to make a deal. But until teams get more serious about their offers, I think you're going to see kind of this song and dance until we get closer to that week. And then you may ask as a follow-up, although Bulls Nation Brazil did not, why did Dorian Finney-Smith get moved? Why did Dennis Schroeder get moved? Those contracts, Schroeder's an expiring. Dorian Finney-Smith does have a player option for next year, but his number is not as large as Vucevic and Zach LaVine. So that's probably why you saw those moves made. The Nets obviously got in ahead of the deadline. I think the Bulls are still going to get there, but we're going to get to that later. All right, question 2 from at Ricky AY 24648-135. It's a lot of numbers. Billy Donovan always talks about earning minutes on this team, yet he still starts Patrick Williams, even though he's been underperforming this season. Why is Billy so reluctant to take him out of the starting lineup? Great question. We've asked Billy this multiple times. I will say a couple things about this. First of all, Billy Donovan in general does not like to make lineup changes. He's very much a player-friendly coach. He'll make rotational changes, and he'll certainly cut back minutes at times, and Patrick Williams has not always been in the closing lineup. But as far as a lineup change, I would be surprised if you see either Julian Phillips or Matas Buzelis enter that starting lineup. This is really when you get down to the crux of finances as well. I mean, the Bulls just signed Patrick Williams to a 5-year, $90 million deal. They need to get value out of that contract. They need to get him obviously playing at a higher level. But I think to obviously bench Patrick Williams in year 1 of that deal would send the wrong message, particularly for a guy. I don't want to make excuses for him, but I just want to give you context. He was not able to participate all offseason because he had foot surgery. He did start the season well, and then had that month, 10-game absence where he was resting the foot. He has not found his rhythm since then. I think you give it a little bit more time, and I think that's what Billy Donovan is doing. Question 3 from L. Stanzik Sports. We know the Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic rumors. What about Lonzo Ball as a trade candidate? An expiring deal, and the way he's playing, would think any contender would be crazy not to want him on its bench. I completely agree that Lonzo Ball is a plug-and-play player for literally any team in the league, much less a playoff team. He would bring significant value to a playoff team because he's obviously got an incredibly high IQ, is a strong two-way player. His three-point shot is rounding back into form, and look, the game slows down in the playoffs, and you want half-court defense, Lonzo Ball is your guy. I personally, to this point, have not heard any interest in Lonzo Ball for this very reason. He's still an injury risk. You don't like to talk about this. It's been a remarkable comeback story. But for an expiring deal, you're not going to get much assets for a guy who's had the injury history that he has had. I think most of the league is cheering for him to finish out this season and keep playing at this high level. But as far as giving up significant assets for a guy who has endured what he has endured physically, I just don't see it. Maybe you get a second-round pick for him closer to the deadline. That remains to be seen, but to this point, you've not heard much buzz around Lonzo Ball, other than the great comeback story. And last but not least, as I try to struggle with the board, is from at RealRome88. Oh, this is speaking my language here, man. Will Radiohead ever get back together? This person knows me. I will just say this. Obviously, you've heard of The Smile. That's Johnny Greenwood and Tom York's new project. Check them out. My son and I have 3 times live. Thanks for all your questions. We'll get back to you again next week.